My mother handed me an invoice. $1 million for raising me. That's the night everything changed. The night success turned into silence. I'm Danielle Thompson, 32 years old, founder of a healthcare tech company I built from scratch. Growing up, love always came with conditions. But I never imagined it would come with a price tag. She looked me in the eye and said, "It's the least you owe me." 8 years later, I saw her again, not at a gala, but on a cold Seattle street. A cardboard sign trembling in her hands, the woman who demanded payment now begged for mercy. If love ever came with strings, you're not alone. Love doesn't send invoices. I grew up in a perfect house. White fence, roses in straight lines, Seattle skies that always looked polite. But inside, love had rules. Affection came with receipts. Gratitude was expected, not felt. Until I was 7, things seemed normal. Dad read bedtime stories. Mom smiled for neighbors. Then one morning, I heard shouting, "I can't do this anymore, Sandra." Dad's voice, the soft man breaking. Her answer was ice. "Then leave." He did. And Mom turned to me. "Your father abandoned us. It's just you and me now." I stared at the empty driveway, waiting for taillights that never came back. The silence that followed became a second parent, cold, watchful, and impossible to please. When I earned an A, she said, "You get your brains from me." A B+. That's your father's laziness. If I wanted new shoes, I first got a lecture. Do you know how much these cost? Every kindness came wrapped in guilt. Every gift was a favor to repay. When relatives sent birthday money, it vanished into a college fund I never saw. Soccer practice stopped. Too much praise from the coach. Not enough for her. Home wasn't home anymore. It was a contract I never signed. School became my sanctuary. Grades were my ticket out. And Mrs. Lawson, my English teacher, was the first to notice. "You can stay here after class," she said softly. No charge. In her classroom, silence didn't punish me. It healed me. I didn't know it then. But her kindness became the blueprint for every real connection I built after. In my house, everything had a price, even love. By the time I turned 18, silence had become my armor. Every word at home was a test I could fail. So I studied instead. Grades were my currency, and freedom was the prize. When my acceptance letter from Stanford arrived, I hid it for 3 days. I'd used Mrs. Lawson's address, afraid Mom would intercept the mail. Full scholarship. My golden ticket out. When I finally showed her, she performed the role perfectly. "Stanford, my daughter, the genius." She called relatives immediately. All my sacrifices finally paid off. Then she looked at me, voice like sugar hiding steel. "You know, you couldn't have done this without me." I smiled. The first lie I told her as an adult. The summer before college was torture. Each box I packed came with guilt. Who will take care of the house? Have you thought about how selfish this looks? By August, I slept with my acceptance letter under my pillow, afraid she'd find a way to keep me. Move-in day felt like escaping orbit. She drove the 6 hours in silence, then charmed everyone on campus, the perfect mother on display. When she left, she leaned close. "Call me every day. Remember who got you here." I promised I would, and broke that promise the next morning. College felt unreal. No guilt. No rehearsed apologies. Just air. Real, breathable air. Still, her shadow followed. Every missed call triggered a rush of fear. Every voicemail began the same. "So this is how success sounds? Forgetting your mother?" I learned to ration conversations like oxygen. Short, polite, empty. Never too warm. Never too long. Then came Professor Kim. Brilliant, calm, unafraid of silence. She read my code and saw me, not my resume. "You have a gift," she said. "But more than that, you have clarity. Protect it." For the first time, I felt seen without a price attached. That night, my phone buzzed. "Mom." I watched it ring, then let it go dark. The quiet that followed wasn't guilt. It was freedom, raw and terrifying. Under her mentorship, I found a kind of validation that didn't demand repayment. By senior year, I was building something of my own. A health tech prototype born from late nights and ramen. Ryan, a grad student, believed in it. Believed in me. Together, we built a startup from the floor up. Mom called it a phase. But each call hurt less. Each silence after felt lighter. I was learning that freedom isn't loud. Sometimes it's the quiet after no. I stopped asking for permission and started practicing peace. The night of the acquisition felt like the end of every sleepless year. Champagne, applause. The room glittered with congratulations and relief. Connect Team Health. Sold for $80 million. We'd done it. I'd done it. Then I saw her. Sandra, my mother, in a dress too formal for the occasion, a smile too sharp to be love. "There's my brilliant daughter," she announced, cutting through the crowd like she owned the room. I froze, my pulse echoing louder than the music. Guests smiled politely. They saw a proud mother. I saw a storm I'd spent years escaping. She hugged me for the cameras, then whispered, "We need to talk, alone." In my office, the mask slipped immediately. Her eyes scanned the space, assessing, measuring. "You didn't think to invite your own mother?" I tried diplomacy. "It's been hectic, Mom. I was going to call tomorrow." She sat in my chair, a power move she'd perfected years ago. "I've been doing some math," she said. "Do you know what it costs to raise a gifted child?" My stomach dropped. She unfolded a paper, an itemized bill. Science camps, tutors, emotional labor. A total circled in red ink, $1,000. "Give me this," she said evenly. "It's the least you owe me." I couldn't breathe, couldn't blink. "Mom, that's not how family works." She tilted her head. "Family? Don't talk to me about family after what you've done." "I'm willing to help," I said quietly. "I'll cover your taxes, your expenses, but I won't hand you $1 million. Her eyes narrowed. "So that's your decision? To humiliate me? After I gave you everything?" I shook my head. "You gave me life. I gave it meaning." The room went still. For a second, I thought she might understand. Then she smiled. Sharp, cruel. "Then you're no longer my daughter." The words hit harder than any slap. She stood, grabbed her purse, and left without looking back. Outside, laughter filled the hall again. Inside, I sank into my chair. The same seat she'd claimed as her throne minutes earlier. The champagne on my desk had gone flat, bubbles fading, like the version of me that still needed her. Through the glass walls, I saw celebration, lights, people cheering, and I felt nothing but clarity. For once, I wasn't buying peace with guilt. I was earning freedom with truth. Michael found me, eyes full of worry. "She asked for $1 million, I said, and my voice cracked. "For raising me." He reached for my hand. No one should have to buy their mother's love. That night, I didn't celebrate. I sat in the dark office, watching her signature still burning in my mind. That night, I paid her debt in full, by refusing to owe her anything again. The celebration ended hours ago, but the echo of my mother's voice still filled every corner of that office. I drove home in silence, the city lights smearing into lines through my tears. For years, I had fought to earn her love. Now I had refused to buy it, and I didn't know whether to feel proud or orphaned. For 2 days, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing there, that red-inked paper between us, like a final invoice for my childhood. When I finally walked into Dr. Martinez's office, my voice barely worked. "She asked for $1 million, I said. "Not as a gift, as payment." Dr. Martinez leaned forward, calm as always. "You're grieving," she said, "but not the mother you lost, the mother you wanted to have." The words cracked something open. Grief and relief wrestled inside me like siblings. I'd always believed cutting contact meant being a bad daughter. Now I was learning it could also mean survival. Over the next weeks, Sandra did what she always did. Calls, messages, threats. She told relatives I'd abandoned her, that I'd stolen her sacrifice and replaced it with success. A few believed her. Others quietly stopped asking questions. At work, I smiled through investor meetings, signed documents, celebrated numbers that meant nothing. At night, I replayed her words, wondering if I really had become heartless, or if I was finally becoming whole. My therapist called it reprogramming, undoing a lifetime of conditional love. Each boundary was a brick in the wall, between who I was and who she made me think I had to be. I started journaling again, writing letters I'd never send. Some began with "Dear Mom," others just started with silence. When I told Michael what happened, he didn't try to fix it. He just sat beside me until the sobbing stopped, and said the simplest thing anyone ever told me. "You don't owe her peace at the cost of your own." So I stopped apologizing for healing. I hired a lawyer to manage her support through a trust. No more direct money, no more manipulation. It wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. For months, guilt still whispered in my sleep, but slowly its voice faded. In its place came stillness, the quiet I'd been chasing my whole life. I built a life from the ashes she left. Every success felt quieter without her voice in it. But peace, I learned, doesn't need applause, just the courage to stand alone. I thought that was the end of our story. I was wrong. 8 years later, on a rainy street in Seattle, I saw my mother again, and this time, she was the one asking for help. 8 years later, I was back in Seattle, a city that still smelled like rain and memory. The conference had ended early. For the first time in years, I had no agenda, no deadline waiting for me to chase. I drove past the house where I'd grown up. The shutters were different, but the ghosts were the same. I didn't stop. Downtown, drizzle turned to mist. People hurried by in coats and earbuds, faces blurred by rain and indifference. That's when I saw her, a woman in a doorway, wrapped in layers of mismatched clothes, a cardboard sign resting beside her. I might have walked past, but something in the tilt of her head stopped me cold. Sandra, my mother. For a moment, the world went silent. The hum of traffic faded. It was just her, and the years between us collapsing like paper. She didn't recognize me at first. Her eyes were fogged, her hands trembling as she reached for the coffee I offered. "Bless you," she whispered, words I'd never heard from her lips before. I sat down beside her, the wet concrete soaking through my coat. "Do you have somewhere warm to go?" I asked. She shrugged. "Sometimes. Depends on the shelter." Then she looked at me again. "You look familiar," she said, brows knitting together. "It's Danielle," I answered softly. "Your daughter." Recognition flickered, then shame. "My Danielle," she murmured. And even now, that possessive tone still carried control. "What happened, Mom?" I asked. The trust was there. "You had everything you needed." She sighed. "I didn't need your charity." Then quieter. "I sold the house. Someone said they'd invest the money. He disappeared." Her story unraveled in fragments. Losses, bad luck, pride. All the things she once used to wound me, now turned against her. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. "Come with me," I said. "I'll arrange help, but it'll go through the trust like before." She frowned, defensive even in defeat. "So you're helping me, but only on your terms?" "Yes," I said, "because those are the only terms that keep us both safe." Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe time had softened her edges. She nodded. "Do what you think is right." That night, I checked her into a hotel and called the care coordinator who'd once managed her trust. This time she accepted. Months later, she lived in an assisted facility, stable, medicated, sometimes remembering me, sometimes not. During one video call, she looked at me and said, "You built a good life, Danielle." Coming from her, it was a miracle. I smiled. "Yeah, Mom, I did." But the truth was simpler. I hadn't built it despite her. I'd built it after her. Because healing isn't about winning. It's about finally laying down the fight. Some storms don't end in thunder. They end in quiet, and the courage to walk away without hate. If you've ever had to set boundaries with someone you love, know this. You can be kind and firm, loving and free. Have you ever had to choose peace over guilt? Tell me in the comments. And remember, your worth was never meant to be measured in debt.
The screen froze mid-scream. Her mouth was wide-open teeth, bared bouquet gripped like a weapon. Behind her, a champagne glass lay shattered on the marble floor, the pieces glinting under white and gold uplighting. The groom, Logan, stood next to her, frozen in time mouth, caught in a silent O of panic. My mother's hand was raised halfway, as if she'd been trying to stop the moment from happening, but nothing could. Not anymore. In the bottom corner, the banner still scrolled Aubrey and Logan, a day of love. I sat on my couch in silence, wine glass in hand, the stream frozen on that exact frame like a painting of disaster no one meant to make. And I didn't blink. There was no soundtrack, no narration, just that still frame and the hum of my old refrigerator in the background. It wasn't the first time I'd been asked to watch things from the sidelines. It was just the first time they gave me a password to do it. They told me I could watch from home, and I did. I watched every second. I watched them walk down the aisle toast with Crystal perform their perfect show, and then I watched it fall apart. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I didn't even pour another glass. I just leaned back and stared at the chaos they had so carefully tried to curate. And as my sister's face, twisted with rage, and her wedding shattered around her, I only had one thought. How did we get here? It was a Thursday when the call came. I was folding laundry in the living room, the kind of quiet task you do when the day doesn't ask much of you. The phone lit up Mom. I hesitated a beat, then answered. "Elena, sweetheart," she said in that airy tone she reserved for weather reports and polite lies. "We wanted to talk to you about the wedding." Her voice floated through the phone like it weighed nothing. But I knew better. I'd grown up in that tone. It was the same one she used when telling me the dress I liked was a bit safe, or that my career choice was responsible if that's what makes you happy. I held my breath. You know how these things go, she continued. Logan's family is quite large, and the venue, well, it has very strict capacity guidelines. It's going to be an intimate affair. Curated, really. Very elegant. Curated. She said it like I was a throw pillow that didn't match the furniture. I waited for her to catch herself. To say, but of course you'll be there. You're her sister. She didn't. So unfortunately, she said still gentle, still effortless. We're not able to have everyone attend in person. Everyone. Funny word that. It seemed to stretch to include Logan's old frat buddies, distant cousins who hadn't sent a Christmas card in years. Even Aubrey's nail tech, the one who once gave me a pitying glance when I asked for a plain French manicure instead of rhinestone claws. But not me. I see, I said. My voice caught like my throat was trying to keep the pain in. Oh, but you won't miss a thing, she chirped quickly, too quickly. We've hired a professional team to live stream the whole thing. High definition. Beautiful angles. It'll feel just like being there. I nodded even though she couldn't see me, even though I didn't believe her, because there's a difference between watching and being included. A concert on a screen isn't the same as standing in the crowd, and watching your sister get married from a laptop in your apartment isn't the same as being invited to witness it, not even close. When the call ended, I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the folded towels in my lap like I didn't recognize them. I'd been erased gently, without malice but with precision. And that's the thing, isn't it? They didn't forget me. They chose not to include me. And then they gave me a link. It didn't start with the wedding. That was just the final proof neatly wrapped in ribbon and exclusion. If I'm being honest, I started disappearing a long time ago. I was 10 the first time I understood what it meant to step aside. I had asked for a slumber party, 3 close friends, nothing fancy, just pizza sleeping bags and a cake with too much frosting. Aubrey was 6. It wasn't her birthday, not even close. But she wanted a pony, not a toy, not a picture. A real pony. She'd seen one at a classmate's party and decided she needed it. When my parents said no, she screamed. The kind of scream that made walls feel thin and patience thinner. By the end of the night, my party was postponed. They said it was for the best, that she was upset and we didn't want to make things worse. Instead, we had a tense family dinner where my cake never left the freezer. I got a savings bond. For your future, my dad said, and Aubrey, still sniffling, was promised a pony ride the next weekend. That was the first trade I remember, my day for her peace. It wasn't the last. In high school, I won the statewide science fair. I had spent 6 months building a working model of an irrigation system, testing, revising, perfecting. I came home beaming the blue ribbon in my hand, still warm. That's wonderful, honey, my mom said, glancing at the ribbon before turning to Aubrey, who had just been cast as tree number 3 in her middle school play. Suddenly, we needed cardboard felt glue glitter. Costume prep took over the dining table for weeks. I built a working water system. She held her arms out like branches. One of us got framed photos on the mantel. It wasn't even close. But I didn't complain. I studied hard. Got into college. Majored in project management because I liked when things made sense and stayed where you put them. I paid my loans. Landed a steady job. Opened a retirement account before 30. Aubrey. She tried 3 business ideas in 2 years, a bead jewelry line, a lifestyle blog, something about goat yoga. Each failed. Each was lovingly funded by my parents. There was always money for her passion, her reinvention, her next idea. And somehow, the more I stood on my own, the less they saw me. It's funny how independence can look like invisibility to the people who raised you. I used to think if I just kept showing up, remembered birthdays, helped with furniture, co-signed that loan for her car, someone would eventually say, "Thank you. We see you." But no one did. They just stopped asking altogether. So when the wedding call came, when I heard my name had been left off the list, I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. Because the truth is, by then, I was used to watching things from the outside. I had been doing it my whole life. The invitation didn't come in the mail. There was no envelope with thick cardstock, no embossed lettering, no careful handwriting with my name spelled out in soft gold ink. Instead, it landed in my inbox. The subject line read, "You're invited to watch Aubrey and Logan's wedding. live stream access. It felt less like a gesture and more like a receipt. Inside was a static graphic with swirling fonts and overexposed engagement photos, a Zoom link, a password that looked like a Wi-Fi code, a note that said the stream would begin promptly at 4:00 p.m. Eastern. There was no personal message, no line from my sister, not even a wish you could be here. It didn't feel like inclusion. It felt like permission to spectate, like I'd been handed binoculars and told I could peek through the fence if I stood quietly enough. A few days later, I ran into Mrs. Kinney, our old neighbor from 2 doors down at the grocery store. She was thrilled. Oh, Elena. You must be over the moon about Aubrey's wedding. Such a lovely couple. What are you wearing to the big day? I opened my mouth and nothing came out at first. Then I smiled tightly. Actually, it's going to be a small, intimate event. I'll be watching from home. They're live streaming it for family who couldn't be there. She paused, her hand resting on a carton of eggs. Her smile faltered just enough to sting. Oh, well, that's modern, she said gently. Very efficient. She patted my arm like someone patting dust off a shelf, and then turned toward the dairy aisle, suddenly remembering she had somewhere else to be. I stood in front of the cereal for a long time after that. I don't even remember what I bought, because there's a particular kind of shame that comes when you realize people aren't just leaving you out quietly. They're doing it with templates. The week before the wedding, I saw something I wasn't meant to see. It was a short video on someone's Instagram story, one of Logan's friends, a face I half recognized from tagged beach photos. Just a flash of a neon sign, some loud laughter, and a caption written in all caps. The Kitten Club was wild. Groom down. It disappeared in 24 hours, but I saw it. I didn't screenshot it. I didn't send it to my mother. I didn't call Aubrey. I just watched it once, then let it fade like so many other things in this family that were never spoken of again. I could have said something. I could have warned her. But I didn't. Because after 30 years of carrying other people's secrets, smoothing over chaos, and keeping peace that was never mine to hold, I had finally learned the difference between silence and surrender. One is passive, the other is deliberate. So I poured myself a glass of wine, took a long sip, and closed the app. Some truths don't need help getting out. Some just need a moment and the right audience. The day of the wedding arrived like a staged photo, too bright, too composed, a little unreal. I dressed simply, nothing dramatic. Just linen soft colors, bare feet. I opened a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc I'd been saving for a reason I couldn't name, poured myself a full glass, and logged in. The live stream opened to a still shot of the altar, white roses, layers of baby's breath, and a backdrop that looked airbrushed. The lighting was warm and dreamy, the kind you only find in wedding magazines or afternoon fiction. A message scrolled in, cursive, across the bottom of the screen. Aubrey and Logan, a day of love. In the corner, there was a chat box. Aunt Carol had already left 3 comments, wishing you all the joy in the world. We're so proud, you look radiant already. There were messages from old neighbors, forgotten cousins, even someone named the Millers who signed their name like a dealership. I didn't type anything. I just watched. The music began a string quartet version of a pop song that tried too hard to sound timeless. Then came the wedding party bridesmaids in mismatched pastels, groomsmen sweating under tailored suits. Logan stood at the altar, his smile, nervous hands wringing just out of frame. Then came my mother. Margot Brooks, in navy chiffon and high heels too tight for honesty, held her posture like a pillar. She smiled as if she were personally holding the entire production together by sheer will. And finally, Aubrey. She looked beautiful, that kind of expensive curated beauty that photographs well and feels far away. Her hair was perfect, her dress flowed like it had been studied in motion. But her eyes moved too quickly, her smile came a second late, and her grip on Dad's arm tight, too tight. She walked like a general inspecting the troops, not a bride walking into a life. The officiant mispronounced Logan's last name, twice. Someone giggled. One of the bridesmaids wobbled in her heels and let out a little shriek as she caught herself nearly sending a floral arrangement flying. The microphone popped, then crackled, then cut out altogether just as Logan began his vows. He tried to project his voice, bless him. but his words evaporated into the wide air like steam off a cooling plate. Aubrey's jaw tensed. Her smile froze. She glanced sharply to the side where a sound tech crouched near the speaker like a man already halfway to blame. And I took a slow sip of wine. They had spent thousands curating the perfect image. But underneath the lace and the lavender lighting, something was unraveling. The reception began the way most of them do, too loud, too bright, and just drunk enough to feel unreal. The screen showed round tables draped in white gold-rimmed champagne flutes catching light and centerpieces so tall they blocked faces. People clapped too long, laughed too high. Everyone looked a little rehearsed. Aubrey's maid of honor, a friend I'd met once at some brunch years ago, took the mic first. Her speech was exactly what you'd expect, bubbly, breathless, full of inside jokes about matching tattoos and that one time in Cabo. The room giggled politely. Then came the best man, Dave. I didn't know Dave, but from the second he grabbed the mic, I knew exactly who he was. Loud, loose, shirt already untucked. He started with safe material college antics, frat house stories, something about Logan once mistaking a fern for a person. People laughed. It was fine, until it wasn't. And of course he boomed, swaying slightly. We gotta give it up for the legendary bachelor weekend in Vegas. I stopped mid-sip. A few guys at a back table whooped. Dave grinned wider. A true last hurrah, am I right? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Unless you bring back a hangover and some very questionable memories from a place called... What was it? He paused, squinting in mock thought. Oh, right. The Kitten Club. The room didn't just fall silent. It collapsed. You could almost hear the click like a trap snapping shut. My mother's smile froze, then fractured. Aubrey turned her head so slowly it was almost graceful. Her expression didn't change at first. She just blinked once, then again, then turned her full body toward Logan. Logan looked pale, not embarrassed, terrified. Dave kept going, oblivious. Man, Logan. I still don't know how we got that bottle comped. Or how you... Okay, Logan barked, lunging toward him. Thanks, Dave. Great speech. That's enough. But Aubrey was faster. She reached for the mic. Her knuckles were white. Logan, she said, her voice tight and shaking but sharp as glass. We talked about this. It was a joke, he stammered. Honey, it was just a joke, she repeated louder now. A joke about what embarrassing me, lying to me. Standing in front of my family and a champagne glass hit the floor somewhere near the back. It shattered with a crisp, clear sound that rang louder than anything Dave had said. Someone coughed. Someone else stood up and sat back down. Logan reached out like he meant to calm her, but she stepped away. Just one clean, sharp step. What happened at the Kitten Club? Logan, he opened his mouth, closed it. Silence. And in that exact moment before he could lie, before she could scream again, the live stream froze. Not a fade, not a glitch. Just an immediate, full-screen freeze. On my laptop, the frame stuck on Aubrey mid-sentence, her mouth a jagged line bouquet raised like she might throw it. Behind her, Logan stood wide-eyed and ashen. Margot, my mother, was caught in the corner, hand half raised, like she could swat the disaster away. And on the bottom of the screen, the banner still scrolled Aubrey and Logan, a day of love. I stared at it, not moving, not blinking. And then softly to no one, I laughed. Because after all the planning, the seating charts, the makeup trials, the curated guest list, they'd finally given me a front row seat. To the moment it all fell apart. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Mom, I didn't answer. It rang again. Then again. Then came the text, Elena, this is a family emergency. Pick up. I let it sit. The screen was still frozen. Aubrey mid-scream. Logan frozen beside her, the banner below, scrolling like nothing had happened. Eventually, I answered. Put it on speaker. I didn't say hello. Did you see my mother snapped? Her voice was frantic, brittle. Did you see what's online? They're sharing it everywhere. Aubrey is inconsolable. We need to get it down. I swirled the last of my wine and stared at the image. You're good with computers, she rushed on. Call TikTok. Get it removed. This is defamation. Logan's parents are threatening to sue. It's not defamation, I said softly. It happened. Elena, she whispered. Please, you have to help. There was a pause. Then I said it. Clear. Even. No anger in it. You told me there wasn't room for me. The silence on the line was immediate. I took a breath. So, with all due respect, I'm not sure this is my emergency. I ended the call before she could respond. The frozen live stream stayed on my screen a little longer. Then finally, I closed the laptop. The chaos disappeared, but the stillness in my apartment. It didn't feel empty. It felt earned. A month passed. The video made its rounds online, screen-recorded, memified, dissected on wedding forums. Someone clipped the frozen image of Aubrey mid-scream and captioned it, "When the group chat finds out you lied." I didn't share it. I didn't even save it. I just watched the noise swell then fade. Through the grapevine, I heard that Aubrey and Logan postponed their honeymoon. They were reevaluating communication, whatever that meant. My mother stopped posting. My father took up woodworking. Apparently, he was carving small birds out of pine and giving them angry little eyes. Me, I got pre-approved for a mortgage. I had been saving quietly for years. Dinners, skipped vacations, deferred birthdays, modest. Always with the thought that one day I'd do something for myself. I toured a dozen properties, tiny places, ones with creaky floors and good bones, and I found it on a shaded street lined with oak trees, a 2-bedroom bungalow with chipped paint, a wide front porch, and a backyard that smelled like real grass. It needed work, but not too much. The day I signed the closing papers, I didn't call anyone. No champagne, no Instagram story. Just me, a pen, and a notary who offered a quiet congratulations. And that was enough. They had spent tens of thousands curating a perfect wedding that exploded in front of the internet. I spent a fraction of that buying something that would still be standing years from now. Not for show. For shelter. That night, I sat on the floor of my new living room. No furniture yet. Just the echo of empty space, a soft lamp in the corner, and a breeze that slipped through the open window like it belonged there before I did. The wood floors creaked beneath me, real wood, nothing polished, nothing fake. I lit a single candle, poured one glass of wine, then I opened my laptop and deleted the wedding link. Not in anger, just because I didn't need it anymore. I was no longer watching anyone else's life unfold. I was in mine now, no banner, no live stream, no curated guest list, just air, just quiet. And it was beautiful. I used to think being left out meant I was missing something, but I wasn't. I was being pointed somewhere else, somewhere better. If they told you there wasn't room for you, but you still remember everything, just leave a single dot. To the happy couple who always did play in the mud, my sister said, raising her glass just high enough to catch the light and the attention of every single person in that barn-turned reception hall. Laughter followed, polite, restrained, but unmistakably sharp, like the sound of crystal cracking under pressure. My cheeks flushed. Not because the joke was clever, but because it wasn't the first time she'd said it, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. I glanced across the long table at my husband. Nathan's hands were resting in his lap, calloused from the fields he'd worked that very morning. He'd changed into his shirt and tie behind the tractor shed just an hour before the ceremony, still dusty from checking irrigation lines. His nails weren't clean. His eyes were. He leaned toward me, then just enough that I felt his breath near my ear. "Let them laugh," he said, his voice steady, warm. "We know what we have." I smiled, but it was brittle. My father had barely touched his dinner, and when he stood to speak, the murmur of forks against plates faded into a hush that felt practiced. Gerald Barrett never wasted words, not in business, and certainly not when publicly critiquing his children. "My daughter Clara," he began with that performative sigh he reserved for speeches at retirement parties and client funerals, "has always chosen a different path." Danielle, my older sister, raised one eyebrow and sipped her wine. Elise looked down at her napkin. While her sisters pursued their careers in law and finance, he continued. Clara followed her heart. A simpler path, a quieter life. The word simpler landed like a thumb pressing on a bruise. And now she's married Nathan, a man who works with his hands and understands the value of honest work. We wish them happiness in their life together." There was applause, brief, thin, a few claps too slow, as if people were waiting to see how they were supposed to react. I reached for my water. I hadn't touched the champagne and stood up. The metal legs of my chair scraped against the barn floor louder than I expected. Every head turned. "To family," I said, lifting my glass. "And to learning who really has your back when it matters." Danielle's smile faltered just for a beat, then returned brighter, tighter, more practiced. I sat down slowly, heart pounding. Nathan reached under the table and gave my hand one firm squeeze. "That's my girl," he whispered. I didn't know then how much weight those 4 words would carry, how much ground they would anchor when the earth finally shifted beneath all of us. 3 years later, we stood in my sister's marble-tiled foyer, holding a green bean casserole that probably cost less than her doormat. It was the annual Barrett family summer gathering, half barbecue, half political theater, and I could already hear the sound of glasses clinking out back the familiar cadence of Danielle's voice, carrying just a bit farther than everyone else's, like a mayor campaigning in her own backyard. As we stepped out onto the stone patio, my mother spotted us first. "Clara," she called, her voice bright and brittle. "There you are. We were just talking about the vacation home Danny and Evan bought in Charleston." Of course they were. Danielle floated toward us in a sundress wide enough to make me nervous for her red wine. Her smile, as always, was calibrated, generous, but calculated. "Oh, you brought food," she said, eyeing the dish like it had crawled out of the dirt itself. "That's sweet." "From our garden," I said, placing it between the catered pulled pork and a bowl of imported olives that looked like they cost more per ounce than our entire tomato harvest. Evan joined us with a martini in one hand and a smirk in the other. His polo shirt looked like it had been pressed directly onto him by a luxury brand. "Is it organic?" he asked without looking at me. "Or just basic?" The question hung there for a second, and I felt the familiar flush creep up my neck. "It's homegrown," Nathan said, stepping beside me. His shirt was simple cotton. His hands were still marked faintly from pruning. He looked like he'd wandered in from another planet. Evan nodded, swirling his drink. "Still doing the dirt thing." "We're doing well," I said. I kept my voice even as practiced as Danielle's smile. "The farm's been profitable for 2 years." Danielle laughed, a delicate sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Profitable," she repeated as if trying the word on for size. "Oh, honey, that's adorable." Her words didn't sting like they used to, but they still left a mark. I remember thinking, if they find us so embarrassing, why do they keep inviting us back? And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice answered, "Because someone always has to play the role of the cautionary tale." I was standing alone near the edge of the patio, watching the light catch on the edge of Danny's new pool when Elise found me. She had 2 glasses of wine in her hands, and that cautious look she always wore at family gatherings, the look of someone bracing for something no one else had noticed yet. "They're being especially awful today," she said, handing me a glass. I took it gratefully. "Today," I raised an eyebrow. "Elise, this is just Tuesday with them." She gave a soft laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's been tense lately. With Evan's work. Danny's been on edge." On edge, how I turned slightly, trying to read her face. She hesitated, glancing toward the house, then leaned closer. I probably shouldn't say anything. That was Elise, in a sentence always halfway between honesty and family loyalty, her heart stuck in the middle like a bookmark in a story she never chose. "You're already saying something," I said gently. "Might as well finish." She lowered her voice. "Some of his investments, they didn't go well. Big ones. There's talk about them having to sell the Charleston house. Maybe the boat, too." I blinked. That wasn't just tension. That was unraveling. But I didn't say anything. Not yet, because the strangest part wasn't the news. It was Elise's face when she told me, like she'd been holding it in for a long time, waiting for someone else to notice. And I wondered, how long had she known things were falling apart? And how long had she let them treat us like we were the ones barely holding on? It came 2 days later, just before sunset, while Nathan and I were in the greenhouse sorting seed trays for fall planting. The air smelled like damp soil and rosemary, and the world felt for once uncomplicated. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I nearly let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Clara. My mother's voice shaky, but clipped the kind of tone she used when someone had just died or ruined Thanksgiving. Hi, Mom. Are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired. Listen, we're having a family meeting this Saturday at the house. 2:00. It's important. I paused, wiping my hands on my jeans. Family meetings weren't a thing in our house, not when it mattered, not when I'd needed them. What kind of meeting? We'll explain when you get here. Just bring Nathan okay. She hung up before I could ask anything else. I stood there, phone still in hand, staring out at the rows of sun-drenched vegetables, things that made sense, things that grew when you gave them care and time. Nathan looked up from the tray of seedlings. Who was that, my mother? I swallowed. She wants us at the house Saturday. Family meeting. He straightened slowly, brushing soil from his hands. What do you think they want? I gave a humorless laugh. Maybe to finally apologize for calling our life a sideshow. Nathan didn't smile. He walked over and gently took the phone from me. Whatever they ask, he said, remember this, you don't owe them anything. And yet, part of me still hoped this was about healing, that after all those years of being the one they barely looked at, I was finally being invited in. But another part, the quieter, sharper one, whispered, or maybe they just need something. And you're the only one left who still has something to give. It rained that morning, a soft gray drizzle that soaked the leaves but never quite touched the ground. Nathan drove us in silence, one hand steady on the wheel, the other occasionally tightening when the tires hit loose gravel. As we turned onto the familiar tree-lined street, I felt something cold settle between my ribs. The house hadn't changed, same trimmed hedges, same flagstone steps, but it looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just grown. Nathan parked at the curb engine, ticking softly as he turned it off. Whatever they ask, he said again, looking at me. You don't owe them a damn thing. I nodded, but the knot in my chest didn't budge. As we climbed the porch steps, my phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. Please come. It's serious. We need you. Danielle. I slipped the phone into my pocket and rang the bell. The door opened too fast, like they'd been standing just behind it. Inside, the furniture was arranged deliberately, chairs angled toward the couch like a courtroom with one empty witness seat waiting. Clara. Nathan, my father, said, his voice smoother than I expected. Thank you for coming. We sat. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was loaded. Practiced. Evan stood near the window, arms folded. My mother twisted her wedding ring like she had when I was 8 and came home with a failing grade in math. Danielle sat perched on the edge of a chair, eyes glassy but alert. Elise was off to the side, hands folded in her lap, looking anywhere but at me. So, I said, finally. What's this really about? My mother opened her mouth, closed it. My father stepped in. The family is facing some financial difficulties. I said nothing. Neither did Nathan. Evan turned around. His face looked worn, the first crack I'd ever seen in his perfect facade. Cut the act, Clara, he snapped. You already know. Your sister told you. I looked at Danielle, whose eyes flicked to Elise. I could feel it now, the shape of it. This wasn't a family meeting. It was a pitch, a plea, or worse, a demand. We could lose everything. My mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hung there heavy and soft like the moment just before glass hits tile. Everything Nathan asked quietly. The house, the retirement accounts, the Charleston property. My father said, the words clipped efficient. Evan made some investment decisions on behalf of the family. I turned to Evan, who was now staring hard at the rug jaw tight. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, but I still don't understand what this has to do with us. Danielle sat forward. It's the land, she said, and just like that, there it was, the mask slipping. Your farm. It's the only major asset not tied up. We need you to sell it, my father said. Blunt, unapologetic. The rain outside had stopped. Inside, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the hollow space where empathy should have been. "You want us to sell our home," I said slowly, "to clean up a mess we didn't make." Evan stepped forward sharp again. "It's about family. About stepping up when it counts." I felt Nathan shift beside me. He stood not abruptly, but with a calm that made the room tilt slightly. "You know," he said, "it's funny how quickly people remember their family when they're drowning." Danielle scoffed. "Oh, come on, Nathan. You farm. You grow vegetables. This isn't life and death." "You're right," Nathan said. Then he crossed the room, opened his leather satchel, and pulled out a thick manila folder. He set it gently on the coffee table right next to the unsigned sale papers they'd prepared. "What's that?" my father asked. Nathan opened the folder, revealing pages that looked more like legal briefs than soil reports. "Patent number 10,847,392, he read. "Advanced precision irrigation system, developed on our land, licensed to 15 farms across the Midwest." He pulled out another, "Soil optimization software, predictive planting data, currently contracted with 3 regional co-ops." My mother stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "We're not just farming," Nathan said, his voice calm but cutting. "We're testing, innovating. Everything we grow, everything we develop, it's part of a larger system." I watched Evan's expression shift from confusion to something colder. "Recognition." "Wait," he said, stepping forward. "What's the company called?" "Verdant Tech," Nathan replied, looking him straight in the eye. "Why familiar?" Evan turned pale, because he knew. Because the company he'd bet against the one he'd convinced his investors to short was ours. "That's impossible," he said quietly. You lost their money," Nathan said, still calm, "by betting on our failure." My father opened his mouth, but no words came. "Every dollar you gambled away," Nathan added, "fed right back into the thing you thought was worthless." Danielle looked stunned. My mother looked like she was trying to wake up. I reached out, then slowly closing the folder. "You didn't just come here for help," I said. "You came here asking us to destroy the very thing you spent years mocking, the thing that without knowing it you'd staked your survival on." And I realized they hadn't just misjudged Nathan. They'd never once tried to see who we really were. They hadn't just needed money. They needed the version of us they thought we were, small enough to say yes, quiet enough to comply, blind enough to forgive. But we weren't that family anymore. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin envelope. No contracts, no patents, just photos, snapshots from a life they barely looked at. I laid them gently on the table. There was one from our wedding, me, in my borrowed dress, Nathan with dirt still under his nails. Everyone else blurred behind us, already half turned away. Another from my graduation. I was holding my diploma. My parents were looking at Danielle. And one from a Christmas dinner, the last one I'd come home for. Elise had set the table. I'd made the entire meal. Danielle arrived late, brought store-bought dessert, and somehow still got thanked for everything. I looked up and saw my mother watching the photos like they might rearrange themselves into a better story. These are the moments, I said, voice low, even. Not the big ones. Not the ceremonies or the speeches. Just the quiet times where you chose everyone but me. No one spoke. I pointed to the wedding photo. Danielle toasted us by calling me dirty. And you laughed. I pointed to the graduation. Dad mentioned Elise's internship but forgot I'd graduated with honors. I placed the final photo down. That night you all left without saying goodbye. Because Danielle had a spa appointment in the morning. Danielle scoffed, arms crossed. "Oh, come on, Clara. You're being dramatic." Nathan's hand brushed mine, but I didn't need it anymore. I was already standing. "You didn't just forget me," I said, eyes locked on each of them. "You built a version of me that was small, unambitious, simple, because it made you feel bigger." I paused. "But I wasn't small. You just refused to look closely." Evan opened his mouth. I held up my hand. "Not this time." "You don't get to speak now," I said softly. "You had years." And in that silence, brittle, stunned, I felt it not power exactly. Not victory. Something quieter, something steadier. Like finally hearing your own voice echo back from a place no one else had ever let you speak. Evan stepped forward first, his voice sharp louder than it needed to be. You think this is about old photos and bruised feelings? This is real money, Clara. Real people. You think that farm makes you invincible? I didn't flinch. He was used to people backing down when he raised his voice. I wasn't that person anymore. No, I said calmly, but it makes us free. Danielle shot up from her chair heels, clicking against the hardwood. We're family, she said, as if that word had just occurred to her. You're seriously going to let us fall apart over pride? You didn't care when I was falling apart, I said quietly. You just called it her phase. My mother stood, hands clasped tightly. You're being cruel. That stopped me. I looked at her, this woman who taught me how to set a table just right, how to write a thank you card, how to shrink myself politely. No, Mom, I said, voice barely above a whisper. I'm just not being quiet anymore. Behind them, Elise shifted. Her eyes met mine. Something flickered. Not yet an apology, but maybe the space where one might grow. We needed you, my father said flatly. I nodded once. You still do. I picked up the folder. Nathan took my hand. Then what do we do now? Danielle asked. You leave, I said. And they did. Not one of them slammed the door. Because when people like them lose control, they don't explode, they vanish. It came the next morning. Early. The sun hadn't fully broken through the fog yet, and the kitchen smelled like wet basil and leftover bread. Nathan was out checking the fence line. I sat at the table holding my coffee, staring at nothing. The phone buzzed. Elise. I almost didn't answer. Hey, she said. No greeting, no filler. Just that small voice I remembered from childhood, the one she used when our parents were fighting, and she wanted me to crawl into her blanket fort and just sit with her. I didn't know how bad it had gotten, she said. Until I saw your face yesterday. There was a pause. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. Not an excuse. Not a performance. Just a sentence wobbling in its own weight. I didn't expect you to, I said. But thank you. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't say she'd talk to the others. She just said, I see it now. And sometimes when someone finally sees you, really sees you, that's enough. For now. 2 weeks later, they showed up again. But this time, it wasn't my family. It was a small group from the Department of Agriculture. A regional rep, 2 researchers, and a photographer. They came to walk the land, document the soil data, review our system. Verdant Tech had just received its first federal innovation grant. I stood beside Nathan as they took photos near the irrigation control hub, the one he built by hand. Piece by piece in the old shed we once thought would collapse in the first hard winter. We didn't hear the car pull up behind us. But when I turned, I saw Danielle. She didn't step onto the field. She stayed on the gravel drive, her white heels not made for mud. She was wearing sunglasses, but not for the sun. She looked at the camera crews, the clipboard in my hand, the seal on the jackets. Then she looked at me. There was a flicker of recognition, not pride, not shame, just the stunned quiet of someone realizing the story they told about you no longer holds. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just turned back to the field and said loud enough for Nathan to hear, we need to plant deeper this season. There's more coming.